Okay, real talk. I think we've all hit that wall where it's like, whoa, too much information, articles, books, videos, it never ends. And honestly, how much are we really remembering?
Right. It's like drinking from a fire hose sometimes.
Exactly. And that's why we're doing a deep dive today on note-taking strategies. It turns out there's a real art to it.
It's more than just scribbling stuff down.
Totally. It's about how our brains learn best and how to use note-taking to make information stick. So that's our mission here, to give you practical tools and insights.
So you can walk away feeling confident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether you're tackling a research paper, a lecture, or even just a really interesting article.
It all starts with the why, though. Like, why bother with notes at all?
I mean, it seems obvious you want to remember stuff. But is there something deeper going on?
Absolutely. One of your sources, Note-Taking Strategies, talks about this. There's research by Jennifer Gonzalez. It's fascinating. It links the physical act of writing to memory formation. Encoding information, like actually writing or sketching it out, it creates these new pathways in the brain.
Wow.
And then when you go back and look at your notes, you're actually reinforcing those connections even more.
So it's like a brain workout.
Exactly.
Okay, that's cool. So it's not just about having something to refer back to. The note-taking itself helps you remember. All right, so before we get into specific methods, got to talk about active listening. I feel like that's got to be key for note-taking, right?
You're spot on. It's a skill. It's not something that just passively happens. Note-taking strategies emphasizes this, especially in our world of constant distractions.
Oh, tell me about it. Phones, notifications.
It's a battle to stay focused, right?
It really is.
That's why that guide suggests some simple stuff. Sit at the front of the room, minimize distractions, put your phone away, even turn off notifications.
Little adjustments, big difference.
Yeah.
Okay, here's one I've always wondered about. How much should I actually be writing down? Do I need to get every single word?
That is such a common misconception. It's actually the opposite. Effective note-taking is not about capturing every single word. Another gem from note-taking strategies.
More about big picture stuff.
Yeah. It's about prioritizing, summarizing, paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Focus on those key terms, those concepts.
So it's more about distilling the core message than getting every little detail.
Yes. And the cool thing is it forces you to engage with the material on a deeper level,
Yeah.
You're not just mindlessly copying, you're processing, synthesizing, making sense of it as you go.
You're translating it almost.
Right.
Okay, this is another one I'm curious about. Recording lectures. Is it helpful or a crutch?
That's a tough one. Note-taking strategies actually presents both sides.
Okay, that's fair.
On one hand, having that recording can be awesome.
Yeah.
Dense lecture, fast-paced, or if you miss a class, it can be a lifesaver.
I can see that, but I bet there are downsides too, right?
Yeah, for sure. The biggest one is the time commitment. You're listening back, pausing, really trying to pull out the information you need. It takes a lot of time. Right. And there's the risk of becoming overly reliant on recordings. You end up less engaged during the actual lecture.
It's tempting to just zone out because you figure you'll catch it later.
Exactly.
So I guess it's about figuring out what works for you. Listener, we want to hear from you. Have you had success with recording lectures, or do you stick to note-taking? But for now, let's move on. This is the exciting part, note-taking styles.
This is it, the core of it all. And you got a ton of options here. Cornell, outline charting, mind mapping.
It's a brain buffet.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so let's start with a classic, the Cornell note system. Note-taking strategies goes into detail about it. It seems to be a student favorite. What's the secret?
It's all about structure and active engagement. You divide your page, wider column for main notes, narrower one for keywords or questions, then a section at the bottom for summarizing key takeaways.
So you're not just writing down stuff, you're actively reviewing and making sense of it.
Right, and that post-class process, filling in those keywords and summaries, that's where the magic happens. You revisit the material, solidify your understanding, and you're creating those memory cues for later.
Oh, that makes so much sense for studying. Okay, I'm just going to say the visual styles really grab me. Mind maps, pattern notes, sketch noting, they seem way more fun than just regular old linear notes.
They can be super powerful, especially for visual learners.
Yeah.
And like note-taking strategies points out, these methods let you see relationships between ideas in a way that makes more sense,
Yeah.
Not just linear.
It's like turning your notes into art and making those connections that make the information stick. Now, this is a method I never thought of for note-taking, the SU3R method. Usually it's for reading, but note-taking strategy says it can work for video lectures too.
Interesting, right?
Yeah. So remind me, what does SQ3R stand for?
Survey, question, read, retrieve, and review.
So it's a very step-by-step approach. I'm guessing it helps you really absorb what's being said.
Absolutely. You start by surveying, getting an overview. Then you come up with questions you want answered during the lecture. Next comes the actual watching or reading, where you're looking for those answers. Then you try to remember the key information without looking. And finally, you review everything to make sure you get it.
Okay, so using SQ3R could make lectures way more interactive and engaging. And speaking of engaging, this next idea really caught my eye. Notes as a dialogue. It's in the talking back to the text section of note-taking strategies.
That's a great point. It's about going beyond just facts and actually having a conversation with the ideas.
So instead of just writing down what the speaker or author said, you're putting in your own thoughts, questions, reactions, maybe even disagreeing.
Exactly. You're making it your own, tying it to what you already know, and even challenging it when you need to.
Which is super important in academics, right? Where you need that critical thinking.
Absolutely. And note-taking can be a tool for developing that skill.
Okay, let's talk about a debate that's been going on forever. Paper versus digital. Both have their pros and cons. Note-taking strategies talks about this too.
Yeah, it's a classic.
It is.
So paper notes, they're awesome for thinking critically, fewer distractions, and you get that tactile connection. There's just something about writing that feels more engaging for some people.
I get that. But digital has its perks too, right? Searchable, organized, and you can access your notes anywhere.
Absolutely.
So convenient.
It boils down to what you like, how you learn, and the situation you're in. So, listener, what about you? Team paper or team digital? What made you choose?
Great question to think about as we wrap up part 1 of our note-taking deep dive. We've covered a lot, the surprising link between notes and memory, active listening, and all those different note-taking styles.
Ew.
It's a lot, but stay tuned, we've got much more to come.
Welcome back to our note-taking exploration. Before we jump into those different note-taking styles, let's focus on some techniques to make your notes even better.
Okay, I'm all about leveling up my note-taking game. What you got?
One simple but super effective strategy is using abbreviations and symbols. It's like your own personal shorthand.
Oh, like my grandpa used to do. His notes were full of these crazy symbols. I could never figure them out.
Yeah. Note-taking strategies talks about developing your own shorthand to write faster. Think about words or phrases you use all the time and make a symbol or abbreviation. Like, instead of writing, for example, you could just use e.g.
Oh, that's smart. Saves so much time and space.
Exactly. It frees up your brain to focus on the actual content instead of getting bogged down in the writing. Another key tip, train yourself to quickly spot those key terms and concepts. Remember, you don't have to write down every single word.
Right. It's more about getting the essence, the main points. But how do you know what to focus on? Sometimes it feels like everything's important.
Pay attention to how the speaker's talking. Listen for phrases like, the most important point is, or make sure you remember this. Those are usually big clues.
Yeah, like little signposts. What about asking questions? Is that okay to do while you're taking notes?
Totally. If something's not clear, raise your hand and ask. Better to get it right then than struggle with confusing notes later.
That's true. Sometimes I hesitate to ask because I don't want to interrupt, but yeah, it's better to just clarify. Okay, confession time. I am not the most organized note taker. Mine usually end up a jumbled mess.
I think we've all been there. Don't worry, you can learn to be organized. A simple trick is to use headings and subheadings. It creates a visual hierarchy.
So it's like outlining within your notes, makes them easier to follow, I guess.
Exactly. Breaks the information down, shows you the flow of ideas. Another tip, embrace white space.
White space? You mean like not filling up every single inch of the page?
Yes. White space is your friend. It makes your notes look better and easier to scan.
It's about finding a balance then. Being concise, but giving your notes room to breathe.
Exactly. Informative, but visually appealing. And speaking of that, let's talk about color and images.
Yes. I love adding visuals. It makes note-taking so much more fun. How can we use them effectively?
Well, you can color code key terms, definitions, or concepts. Or you can even draw diagrams, sketches, or mind maps.
Like a visual dictionary.
Right. Those visual cues make the information more memorable. Helps you connect those concepts.
Okay, so we've talked about taking notes, but what about afterwards? It's tempting to just shove them in a folder and forget about them. But I bet that's not what you should do.
Reviewing is key. That's how you really solidify your learning. It's like cementing those new pathways in your brain. The sooner you review after taking notes, the better. Within 24 hours, ideally.
Why 24 hours? Is it because we forget stuff quickly?
Partly, yeah. The information's fresh, so reviewing helps it stick before it fades. But it's not just about rereading. You got to actively engage with the material. Highlight, jot down extra questions, maybe rewrite sections to make sure you understand.
So you turn your notes into a study guide, not just a record of what was said.
Yes. And summarizing is another powerful tool. Pretend you're explaining the material to someone who wasn't there. Make it short and sweet, hit those main points. It forces you to really think it through.
It's like giving yourself a mini lecture. Okay, let's talk about something a lot of students struggle with. Using notes for exams. How do you go from notes to actually using that knowledge on a test?
That's where good notes really pay off. They become your secret weapon. One thing you can do is make flashcards from your notes. Key term or concept on one side, definition or explanation on the other.
It's like a portable quiz game. I love it.
Right. Flashcards are awesome for active recall and testing yourself. Another idea is to turn your notes into mind maps. Start with a central topic, then branch out with related ideas, examples, and connections. It helps you see how everything fits together.
Mind maps are great for seeing the big picture. Now, I've always been fascinated by the idea of different learning styles. How can we tailor our note-taking to fit those?
That's important. Everyone learns differently. Visual learners might want to use more images, diagrams, and color coding in their notes. Auditory learners might find it helpful to record lectures or read their notes out loud.
And what about kinesthetic learners, the ones who learn best by doing things?
They often do better taking notes while standing or moving around. Using things like building blocks or Play-Doh to represent concepts can help them too.
So there really is a style for everyone. This has been so helpful. I feel like I'm finally understanding how to take good notes.
It's about finding what works for you and always refining your approach.
Welcome back. We've covered so much in our note-taking journey, from active listening to specific techniques, even tailoring your approach to how you learn best. Now let's get into some more advanced strategies to take your note-taking to the next level.
All right, you ready to become a note-taking master?
Oh, I'm ready.
Okay, good. One super effective technique is chunking. Have you ever heard of that?
Chunking. Maybe. It rings a bell, but I'm not totally sure.
So, the idea is that our brains process information better in small pieces, rather than trying to take in a ton of information all at once. Think about phone numbers. We break them up into chunks so we can remember them easier. It's the same idea with note-taking.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. So how do you actually use chunking when you're taking notes?
Well, as you're writing, look for natural breaks or changes in the material. Maybe there are headings, subheadings, or even just a shift in the topic. Use those breaks to visually separate your notes. You can leave extra space between sections or use different colored pens to show the different chunks.
Like creating little mental compartments for the information.
Yes, exactly.
I can see how that would make reviewing and remembering stuff so much easier.
It helps your brain process it better too, right from the start. Another powerful technique is active recall. Basically, the more effort you put into remembering something, the better you'll remember it.
Active recall. Interesting. So is that like testing yourself after you've taken notes?
That's one way to do it. You can use the question-answer method. As you take notes, create questions based on the material. Then, when you're reviewing, hide the answers and try to remember them from memory.
Ah, so you're turning your notes into a quiz.
Exactly. And that struggle to remember actually makes those connections in your brain stronger. You could also try summarizing the main points of a section or a whole lecture without looking at your notes. Then you can check your notes and see how you did.
I like that. It's definitely more active than just rereading your notes over and over. I've always found that if I can connect new information to my own life, it's easier to remember. Is that something you suggest too?
Absolutely. The more you can relate new information to what you already know or have experienced, the more it sticks.
But sometimes it's hard to find those connections. Any tips?
As you're taking notes, think about how the material relates to your own life. Like, if you're learning about history, ask yourself, how does this connect to what's happening in the world today? If you're studying science, try to think of real-world examples.
So making it relevant, making it personal.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's talk about technology. It's changed how we take notes, but it can also be a huge distraction. What are your thoughts on digital note-taking?
It's a tough one.
It is.
Because it's such a powerful tool.
Right.
But it can be so distracting.
It's a double-edged sword, right?
Mm.
The key is to be mindful. Choose tools that work for you and use them in a way that helps you focus, not distracts you.
So if you're getting pulled into social media while taking notes on your laptop, maybe try a website blocker.
Yeah, good idea. Or turn off your phone.
Just eliminate the temptation.
Exactly. And if you use a note-taking app, Really explore it. See how you can customize it. A lot of apps can help you organize, make flashcards, record audio, even work with others.
It's about using the technology to your advantage, not letting it control you. All right, as we wrap up this deep dive, any final thoughts or key takeaways you want to leave us with?
Note-taking is a personal thing. It's a journey. There's no one right way to do it. The important thing is to experiment, find what works best for you, try new things, mix and match. Don't be afraid to break the rules.
I love that. So listener, our challenge to you, take one new technique from this deep dive and try it out. See what happens. Does it help you focus? Remember things better? Does it help you make new connections? We want to hear about it.
We know everyone can become a great note-taker. It's about finding the right tools, the right techniques, the right mindset. Enjoy the journey and watch your learning take off.
That's it for this deep dive into note-taking strategies. We hope you learned some valuable tips and tricks to help you learn more effectively and reach your full potential. Thanks for joining us.